They called the alien girl worthless meat, sold as livestock, shamed for her size. The auction block, the holding pens beneath Nexus Station reeked of fear and desperation. Steam hissed from corroded pipes overhead, mixing condensation with the stale air that carried the scent of unwashed bodies and industrial cleansers. In the dim amber lighting, rows of cells held the galaxy's unwanted, debtors, prisoners, and those unfortunate enough to be born human in the wrong sector. Kara Thorne stood in cell block 7, her massive frame impossible to ignore even in the crowded space. At 7 feet and 2 inches tall, with shoulders that could have been carved from granite and arms thick as support beams, she towered over every other captive. Her short-cropped black hair was streaked with premature silver, and her pale green eyes held the hollow look of someone who had stopped hoping long ago. The neural collar around her neck hummed with a low vibration, suppressing the combat enhancer in her bloodstream while broadcasting her status to any scanner within range. The readout was always the same: Genesis Project Subject 247, classification, defective. Recommended use, heavy labor only. She had been hearing those words for 3 years now, ever since the military tribunal declared her unsuitable for active service. Too aggressive, they said, unable to follow orders. A failed experiment that cost the Colonial Defense Force millions of credits and produced nothing but a woman too big to breed and too unstable to trust with weapons. The auction platform sat in the center of Nexus Station's black market district, surrounded by traders, labor bosses, and worse. Holographic displays showed images and specifications for each lot, while auctioneers in 6 different languages called out bids for human cargo. The sound echoed off the metal walls like the cries of scavengers fighting over scraps. Captain Marcus, Chen moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his weathered brown coat concealing the weapons beneath. At 45, his face showed the lines of a man who had seen too much and slept too little. Dark hair streaked with gray was pulled back in a simple knot, and his brown eyes missed nothing as they scanned the displays. He had not come to Nexus, station to buy slaves. His mission was information, tracking down the disappeared colonies on the rim worlds, finding any trace of the thousands of humans who had vanished without a trace. But something about Lot 247 made him pause at the display screen. The image showed a woman who looked more like a warrior than a laborer. Even in the degrading prison uniform, she stood straight, chin level, eyes focused on something beyond the camera. The text listed her as breeding stock, but the red stamps across the file told a different story. Unsuitable for reproduction, the auctioneer announced as Kara was led onto the platform. Genetic modifications render subject sterile. Bidding starts at 500 credits for labor classification. Kara kept her breathing steady as the crowd evaluated her like a piece of machinery. She had learned not to meet their eyes, not to give them any reason to see her as anything more than muscle and bone. The restraints around her wrists were unnecessary. She had nowhere to run, and the collar would drop her unconscious if she tried to fight. A Kelak trader near the front raised a chitinous appendage. 600. Mining operation on Kepler needs heavy lifters. Another voice called out from the back. 750, demolition work pays better. Marcus found himself studying the woman's face as the bids continued. There was something in her posture, the way she held herself despite the circumstances, that reminded him of soldiers he had known. Good soldiers. The kind who died protecting others while bureaucrats decided their fate from safe offices. 1,000 credits. The voice belonged to a hegemony procurer, its translator collar rendering the alien speech into flat mechanical tones. Food production facility requires durable workers. Subject will process organic waste until failure. The casual mention of working someone to death seemed to pass without comment from the crowd. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He had seen too many humans disappear into hegemony facilities, never to be heard from again. Without fully understanding why, he raised his hand. 1,500. The auctioneer's eyes lit up at the unexpected jump. 1,500 from the human bidder. Any advance on 1,500? The hegemony procurer's sensor stalks swiveled toward Marcus, but after a moment of consideration, it stepped back. The Kelak trader clicked its mandibles in frustration but did not counter. Sold to bidder 47 for 1,500 credits. The transaction processed quickly. Marcus transferred the credits from his ship's account and received a temporary custody chip and release codes. The whole thing took less than 5 minutes, the price of buying a person's life in the outer systems. He found Kara in a processing chamber, sitting on a metal bench while a medical scanner confirmed her vital signs. The collar around her neck had been switched from auction mode to transfer status, its light shifting from red to amber. "Kara Thorne," he said, reading from the custody chip. "Genesis Project Subject 247. She looked up at him with eyes that showed no surprise, no hope, just a patient waiting for the next set of orders. "Yes, sir. What do you need me to do?" The formal response, delivered in a voice trained for military reporting, told Marcus more than any file could. "First thing, I need you to understand something. I didn't buy you to own you. I bought you because I couldn't stand watching them send you to die in some hegemony waste facility." Kara's expression did not change, but he caught a slight tightening around her eyes. "I don't understand, sir. Call me Marcus, and what I mean is, you have choices now. You can come with me, or I can drop you at the next human settlement with enough credits to start over. Your decision." For the first time since being led onto the platform, Kara's careful composure cracked slightly. "Why?" "Because I've read enough Genesis Project files to know what they did to you, and because no one should end up in a place like this just for being inconvenient to bureaucrats." The collar around her neck chimed softly as it registered the custody transfer. Technically, she belonged to him now, at least according to the legal framework of the outer systems. But the way he stood just outside arm's reach, the fact that he had not grabbed the control chip or tried to establish dominance, told her something different. "If I come with you," she said slowly, "what would you expect from me?" Honest answer? "I don't know yet. I captain a small ship, do some trading, help people when I can. Could use someone good in a fight, but that's not a requirement. Main thing I need is someone I can trust to watch my back." Kara studied his face, looking for the lies or hidden purposes she had learned to expect. His skin was weathered from years in space, with small scars that spoke of real experience rather than cosmetic enhancement. When he met her eyes, he did not look away or try to intimidate her. After 3 years of being evaluated like livestock, the simple respect in his gaze was startling. "The Genesis files," she said. "What do they say about me?" Marcus pulled out a small tablet and scrolled through the data. Enhanced strength, speed, and reflexes. Accelerated healing. Combat conditioning from age 12 through 18. Psychological. Evaluation notes difficulty with authority structures and excessive protective instincts. He looked up from the screen. "Sounds like they tried to build the perfect soldier and got upset when you had opinions." Despite herself, Kara almost smiled. "Something like that." The processing chamber door hissed open, and a station security guard motioned for them to leave. Marcus stood and offered Kara his hand, not to pull her up, but as a gesture of partnership. After a moment's hesitation, she took it. The Defiance was a modified cargo hauler, built for speed and endurance rather than comfort. Marcus led her through the airlock and into the main corridor, past crew quarters and storage bays that had been converted for multiple uses. The ship smelled of recycled air and machine oil, but it was clean and well-maintained. "Your quarters are here," he said, stopping at a door marked with temporary access codes. "Privacy lock is yours to control. Door only opens if you want it to." Kara entered the small cabin and found it equipped with a narrow bed, storage lockers, and a personal hygiene station. Simple, functional, but more private space than she had seen in years. She turned back to find Marcus still standing in the corridor. "The collar," she said, touching the metal band around her neck, "comes off as soon as we clear station space. I've got the release codes, but it needs to be done in open space where the signal won't be tracked." 2 hours later, the Defiance cleared Nexus Station's gravity well and jumped to hyperspace. Marcus kept his word, using the release codes to deactivate the neural collar. The metal band split along hidden seams and fell away, leaving only a faint line on Kara's neck where it had rested. She touched the spot gently, hardly believing it was gone. For 3 years that collar had defined her existence, suppressing her enhanced abilities, marking her as property, controlling her every movement. Without it, she felt strangely light. "What now?" she asked. Marcus was checking the navigation display, but he looked up when she spoke. "Now you decide what you want. We're headed for Haven Station. Neutral territory, good place to lay low and make plans. Take some time to figure out what comes next." Kara moved to one of the observation ports and watched the stars streak past. For the first time since leaving the Genesis Project facility, she was moving through space as something other than cargo. The sensation was both liberating and terrifying. "The one, protective instincts the file mentioned," she said without turning around. "They weren't wrong about that." "What happened?" She was quiet for a long moment, remembering. "Training exercise, simulation of civilian evacuation under fire. My squad was supposed to follow extraction protocol, but the scenario put non-combatants in danger. I broke ranks to protect them." Her reflection in the viewport showed a face marked by old pain. "Command said I was too emotional, couldn't follow orders when it mattered. That soldiers who put civilians before mission objectives were liabilities." Marcus joined her at the viewport, his own reflection appearing beside hers. "For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. It cost me everything. Career, future, identity. Everything I was trained for, everything I was supposed to be." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe it showed you who you really are underneath all that conditioning. Someone who protects people even when it costs you something. Words hit her in a way she had not expected. For 3 years she had carried the judgment of her superiors like a weight, accepting their verdict that she was broken, defective, unable to function as designed. But sitting in this ship, looking out at the stars with the collar finally gone, from her neck, she began to consider the possibility that being different did not necessarily mean being wrong. "I don't know how to be anything other than a soldier," she admitted. "That's all right," Marcus said. "I don't know how to be anything other than stubborn. We'll figure it out as we go." Behind them, the Defiance's engines hummed with the steady rhythm of a ship built for long journeys. Ahead lay Haven Station and whatever choices waited there. But for the first time in years, those choices would be Kara's to make. Awakening Strength Haven Station orbited a gas giant on the edge of civilized space, its rotating sections gleaming against the swirling colors of the planet below. As they approached the docking ring, Kara watched freighters and passenger ships move in carefully controlled patterns, guided by traffic control signals that painted light trails across the darkness. "Independent territory," Marcus explained, as he guided the Defiance toward their assigned berth. "No questions asked, no registry checks. Popular with people who value privacy." The station's interior was a maze of commercial districts, residential areas and service sectors connected by transit tubes and moving walkways. Unlike the grimy desperation of Nexus Station, Haven maintained an atmosphere of controlled neutrality. People moved with purpose rather than fear, and the security guards carried stunners rather than military weapons. Marcus had arranged temporary quarters for them in a respectable hotel near the commercial district. 2 rooms with connecting doors, giving Kara privacy while keeping them close enough for safety. As she settled into the clean, comfortable space, she found herself unsure what to do with so much freedom. "There's an observation deck on level 7, Marcus said, stopping by her door. "Good place to think. Take your time getting used to this." Kara spent the first day simply walking through the station, marveling at the casual interactions between humans and aliens. Traders negotiated contracts in multiple languages. Families traveled together without armed escorts. Children played in public areas without fear. It was a vision of civilization she had only read about in military briefings. But on the second day, their peaceful acclimatization was shattered. The alarm klaxon started sounding as Kara was returning from the observation deck. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in pulsing red, and the station's public address system crackled with urgent announcements. "All civilians report to designated safe areas. Security alert level 5. This is not a drill. Kara's enhanced reflexes kicked in automatically, her body dropping into a combat-ready stance even as her conscious mind processed the situation. 3 years of suppression under the neural collar had not erased decades of training. She moved through the corridors with predatory grace, every sense alert for threats. She found Marcus in their quarters, buckling on weapons and checking ammunition loads. His casual trader facade had vanished, replaced by the focused intensity of a man preparing for battle. "Pirates," he said without looking up. "3 ships just dropped out of hyperspace. Station defense grid is down. Someone sold them the security codes. What's the plan?" Marcus paused in his preparations, seeming surprised by the question. "Plan is to get to the Defiance and run. Station security will handle the pirates." "What about the civilians? The families with children?" "Not our fight, Kara. We help who we can by staying alive and mobile." But even as he spoke, reports were coming over the emergency channels. Pirate boarding parties had already breached sections 4 and 7. Station security was overwhelmed, falling back to protected zones and abandoning whole residential areas to the raiders. Kara moved to the window and looked out at the docking ring where the Defiance waited. Between them and the ship, she could see figures in combat armor moving through the commercial district, herding civilians at gunpoint. A woman clutched a small child while pirates rifled through her belongings. An elderly man was struck down when he moved too slowly. The protective instincts that had ended her military career flared to life with overwhelming intensity. "I have to go," she said, turning from the window. Marcus looked up from checking his sidearm. "Go where?" "Down there. Those people need help. Kara, listen to me. You're not a soldier anymore. You don't have weapons, backup, or any kind of support. Going down there alone is suicide." She met his eyes with a steady gaze that reminded him of the woman on the auction platform, unbreakable despite everything that had been done to her. "Maybe. But I can't watch them suffer and do nothing." For a moment, Marcus struggled with competing instincts. The practical part of his mind said to grab Kara and run for the ship. But looking at her face, seeing the quiet determination there, he recognized something he had been searching for without realizing it. "All right," he said, sealing his weapon harness. "But we do this smart, coordinated. You watch my back, I watch yours." They made their way through the service corridors toward the commercial district, avoiding the main thoroughfares where pirate squads were operating. Kara moved with fluid silence despite her size, her enhanced reflexes automatically adjusting, her gait to minimize noise and visibility. The first pirate they encountered was standing guard over a group of terrified shopkeepers. He wore piecemeal armor and carried a military-grade assault rifle, but his attention was focused on counting stolen credit chips, rather than watching for threats. Marcus signaled for Kara to circle around while he created a distraction. But before he could move, she was already in motion. 3 years of suppressed enhancement suddenly unleashed themselves in a blur of controlled violence. She covered the 20-foot distance in less than 2 seconds, moving with inhuman speed and grace. The pirate had just enough time to look up, before her hand clamped over his mouth and her other arm wrapped around his neck. The chokehold was precisely applied, cutting off blood flow to the brain without crushing the windpipe. He went limp, in her arms without making a sound. Marcus stared in amazement as Kara gently lowered the unconscious pirate to the floor and retrieved his weapon. The whole encounter had taken perhaps 5 seconds, executed with the kind of surgical precision that military trainers could only dream of achieving. "Genesis Project," she said simply, checking the rifle's ammunition count. 15 years of conditioning doesn't just disappear. They liberated 3 more groups of civilians over the next hour, working in perfect coordination despite having never trained together. Marcus provided tactical guidance and covering fire while Kara's enhanced abilities let her neutralize threats, with minimal violence. Not one pirate was killed, but several would wake up with severe headaches and missing equipment. The breakthrough came when they reached the main plaza, where the pirate commander had set up a temporary base of operations. 24 armed raiders controlled the area, while their leader, a scarred Vorthon mercenary, interrogated station officials about the location of valuable cargo. "Too many," Marcus whispered as they observed from a maintenance alcove. Even with your abilities, we can't take them all. Kara studied the tactical situation with eyes trained to assess battlefield conditions. The pirates had positioned themselves poorly, clustering around their commander rather than establishing proper coverage. Most importantly, they had grown, overconfident, treating this as a simple smash-and-grab operation rather than maintaining military discipline. "I don't need to take them all," she said. "Just their leader." Before Marcus could object, she was moving. Not the careful stealth of their earlier encounters, but a full combat sprint that covered ground faster than most people could track visually. She vaulted over barriers, bounced off walls, and used the plaza's architectural features like stepping stones. The first pirates to notice her approach barely had time to raise their weapons before she was among them. Her enhanced reflexes let her predict their movements and react faster than human normal nervous systems could process. She disarmed the off. First, with a precise strike to his wrist, used his falling rifle to block shots from two others, and continued toward the commander without slowing down. The Vorthan mercenary was reaching for his sidearm when Kara's hand closed around his throat. She lifted his considerable bulk off the ground with one arm, her enhanced strength making the gesture look effortless. "Order your people to stand down," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the plaza. "Now." The pirate leader looked into her pale green eyes and saw something that made him reconsider his tactical situation. This was not a desperate civilian or overwhelmed security guard. This was a predator that had been pretending to be prey. And now the pretense was over. "Stand down," he croaked through her grip. "All units, fall back to the ships." The pirates began withdrawing in good order, dragging their unconscious companions and abandoning most of their stolen goods. Within minutes, the plaza was clear except for confused civilians and the small pile of weapons Kara had collected. Station security arrived as the last pirate ship was departing. The chief of security, a grizzled human veteran, surveyed the scene with professional appreciation. "Clean work," he said to Marcus and Kara. "Military?" "Former," Marcus replied. "Just trying to help." The security chief nodded and began coordinating the cleanup. As they walked away, he could be heard telling his subordinates, "Mark those two as friendlies. That kind of skill set is rare." Back in their quarters, Marcus poured himself a drink and offered another to Kara. She accepted it, but did not drink, instead staring out at the gas giant's swirling surface. "You're not defective," he said finally. "What?" "The Genesis Project evaluation, they were wrong. You're not too aggressive or unable to follow orders. You're exactly what they tried to create, someone who protects people. The problem was never with you." Kara turned from the window, her expression thoughtful. "Then why did they throw me away?" "Because they wanted a weapon, and you insisted on being a person. That scared them." She sipped her drink, considering his words. "What happens now? I can't go back to military service. The Genesis Project is classified, and officially I don't exist anymore." Marcus set down his glass and leaned forward. "There are other ways to serve. Other people who need protection from things the military won't touch. Pirates, slavers, corrupt officials. People like us." "Us?" "The Defiance isn't just a trading ship, Kara. I work with a network of people who help, where we can, rescue missions, supply runs to isolated colonies, intelligence gathering. Not official, not sanctioned, but necessary." The offer hung in the air between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Kara understood that this was a moment of choice, perhaps the first real choice she had been offered since leaving the Genesis Project facility. "Why ask me? You barely know me." "Because today I watched you take on 24 armed pirates to protect civilians you'd never met. Because when I bought you from that auction, I thought I was saving one person. Now I realize you might be able to help save a lot more." Kara walked to her equipment bag and pulled out the Genesis Project file Marcus had shown her on Nexus Station. The damning psychological evaluations, the classification as defective, the recommendation for disposal as unsuitable for service. She held the datapad for a moment, then deleted the file with a single keystroke. "I'm tired of being what other people made me," she said. "Time to find out who I choose to be." Marcus smiled and raised his glass. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," she agreed. Outside their window, Haven Station continued its slow rotation around the gas giant, carrying thousands of lives through the darkness between stars. And in one small quarters, two people who had found each other in the galaxy's forgotten corners began planning how to light a few candles against that darkness. The next morning brought a priority message from the Outer Rim, a distress call from Titan Colony, one of the most isolated human settlements in known space. The message was fragmentary, damaged by interference and distance, but the key words came through clearly. Under attack, massive casualties, urgent assistance required. Marcus studied the star charts while Kara read the intelligence reports. Titan Colony was 3 days away at maximum speed, located in a system that offered little strategic value but served as a way station for deep space exploration missions. Could be pirates again, Marcus said. Or worse. The hegemony has been expanding into that sector. How many people? Maybe 8,000 colonists, mostly families, researchers, support staff, not military. Kara looked at the colony's profile. Data. Schools, hospitals, residential areas designed for long-term habitation rather than quick resource extraction. The kind of place where children learn to read under alien stars and parents plan for generations they would never see. We have to go, she said. Marcus nodded, already plotting their hyperspace jump. I'll contact the others, see who can rendezvous with us. The Defiance departed Haven Station 6 hours later, carrying supplies for a rescue mission and two people who had found their purpose in the space between official channels and desperate need. Behind them, the gas giant storms continued their eternal dance, indifferent to human struggles. But aboard the ship, Kara Thorne was finally becoming who she had always been meant to be. The giant's stand, the Titan colony system appeared normal, on long-range sensors until the Defiance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the gravity well. Then the scope of the disaster became clear through the electronic static and electromagnetic interference that spoke of recent weapons fire. 3 hegemony dreadnoughts in low orbit, Marcus reported from the pilot's seat, his voice tight with controlled anger. Colony's defense grid is completely dark. I'm reading massive energy discharges from the surface. They're not just attacking, they're strip mining the place. Kara studied the tactical display from the co-pilot station, her enhanced reflexes automatically calculating firing angles and approach vectors even as her conscious mind processed the scope of the atrocity. The hegemony ships were methodically bombarding sections of the colony while massive cargo haulers stood by to extract anything valuable from the rubble. 8,000 people, she said quietly. Were, Marcus corrected grimly. Biosensors are showing maybe 1,200 life, signs scattered across the surface. The rest, he didn't finish the sentence. The rescue flotilla Marcus had contacted was still 18 hours away, too late to affect the outcome for most of the colonists. The Defiance was alone against 3 ships that could reduce it to vapor with a single, concentrated salvo. We run, Marcus said, reaching for the hyperspace controls. Live to fight another day, rescue who we can later. Kara's hand moved faster than thought, covering the control panel before Marcus could initiate the jump. Her pale green eyes held the same determination he had seen on Haven Station, but now it burned with an intensity that made the air around her seem to vibrate. No, she said. Those people are dying right now. Every minute we wait, more of them are gone forever. Kara, be reasonable. 1 light cruiser against 3 dreadnoughts is suicide. We can't save them if we're dead. She stood and moved to the weapons locker, pulling out combat armor that Marcus had acquired for potential boarding actions. The enhanced polymer plating was designed to fit over her massive frame, turning her into something that looked more like a walking fortress than a human being. The hegemony ships are in low orbit, she said, sealing the armor's joints with practiced efficiency. Their targeting systems are focused on surface bombardment, not ship-to-ship combat. They won't expect an attack. Even if we could get close enough to matter, what's the plan? Ram them? Kara activated the armor's heads-up display and began running targeting calculations through the enhanced processing centers in her brain. The Genesis project modifications included neural interfaces that could link directly with compatible military hardware, turning her into a living weapon system. Get me aboard the lead ship, she said. Give me 5 minutes alone with their command center. Marcus stared at her as the implications sank in. You want me to get you close enough to board a hegemony dreadnought, alone, while it's actively engaged in combat operations? Yes. The simple word carried absolute certainty. Marcus realized he was looking at something the Genesis project designers had never fully understood. Not just enhanced physical capabilities, but the kind of moral clarity that turned tactical assessments into personal imperatives. This is insane, he said, but his hands were already moving over the helm controls, plotting an approach vector that would use the planet's electromagnetic field to mask their signature. The Defiance streaked through space like a missile, its engines running at dangerous overload levels while Marcus used every trick he had learned in 20 years of evading authority. The ship's stealth systems were civilian-grade, barely adequate for hiding from customs patrols, but somehow they managed to slip through the hegemony formation's sensor net. Docking tube deployment in 30 seconds, Marcus announced as they approached the lead dreadnought's ventral hull. You sure about this? Kara checked the seals on her armor one final time and activated the magnetic clamps on her boots. I'm sure about what happens if I don't try. The docking tube extended with mechanical precision, cutting through the dreadnought's hull plating, like a plasma torch through paper. Atmosphere rushed out in a brief hurricane before emergency systems sealed the breach, leaving a corridor barely wide enough for Kara's armored form. She moved through the ship with lethal efficiency, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to navigate the unfamiliar layout while avoiding or neutralizing security systems. The hegemony crew was focused on their bombardment mission, leaving internal defenses minimal. Those guards she encountered went down quickly and quietly, victims of precisely applied chokehold that left them unconscious but alive. The command center was a circular chamber at the ship's heart, filled with holographic displays showing the systematic destruction of Titan colony. Hegemony officers in their distinctive chitin armor coordinated the attack with the cold efficiency of insects dismantling prey. Kara burst through the blast doors like an ancient berserker, but her assault was controlled and surgical. She disabled the command crew with devastating combinations of enhanced speed and strength, leaving the ship's captain conscious but restrained in his command chair. Your fleet will withdraw immediately, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber despite the armor's filters. Call off the bombardment and depart this system. The hegemony captain's translator collar rendered his speech into mechanical tones. Impossible. This world has been claimed by the collective. Human colonists are illegal occupants. Kara moved to the tactical display showing the ongoing bombardment. Each red marker represented hundreds of innocent lives being snuffed out by weapons designed to crack planets, children who would never grow up, parents who would never see home again, dreams ending in fire and vacuum. Then I guess we have a problem, she said. Her armored fist came down on the command console with enough force to shatter the crystalline matrix that controlled the ship's weapon systems. Sparks and coolant fluid erupted from the damaged electronics as multiple system failures cascaded. Through the dreadnought's network, the bombardment stopped. Emergency klaxons began sounding throughout the ship as critical systems went offline. Without its primary command center, the massive vessel began drifting out of formation, its automated systems struggling to compensate for the sudden loss of centralized control. You have 1 minute to signal the other ships, Kara told the captain. Tell them to withdraw or I start disabling life support systems. The hegemony officer looked at the destruction around his command center and realized he was facing something beyond normal tactical parameters. This was not a negotiation between military forces. This was a natural disaster in human form, and resistance would only increase the damage. He activated his communications array and transmitted the withdrawal order. Kara monitored the signal to ensure it was genuine, then made her way back through the ship to the docking tube. Behind her, hegemony damage control teams were discovering the extent of her sabotage. Not just the command center, but critical nodes throughout the ship's network that would take days to repair. The Defiance was waiting where Marcus had promised, engines hot and ready for immediate departure. As Kara sealed herself into the airlock, She could see through the viewports that the other two hegemony dreadnoughts were already beginning their withdrawal, following their flagship's lead. "Status report," Marcus called through the comm system, as she made her way back to the bridge. "Mission accomplished. The bombardment has stopped and the fleet is withdrawing. But we need to get to the surface immediately. There are still survivors down there." Marcus was already plotting their descent trajectory. "Medical supplies are prepped and ready. I've also got emergency shelter units and food for about 500 people. It's not much, but it's what we could carry." The colony's main settlement was a crater filled with twisted metal and burning debris. But scattered across the surrounding terrain, Kara's enhanced vision could pick out the heat signatures of survivors. People who had made it to emergency shelters, or simply been lucky enough to be away from the primary target zones when the bombardment began. They spent the next 6 hours moving from site to site, pulling injured colonists from the wreckage and providing what medical aid they could. Kara's strength proved invaluable for moving debris that would have required heavy equipment, while Marcus coordinated rescue efforts and treated the wounded with supplies from the Defiance's medical bay. The survivors they found were mostly in shock, unable to fully process what had happened to their home. Families had been scattered, children separated from parents, entire neighborhoods reduced to radioactive glass. But as word spread that help had arrived, more people began emerging from their hiding places. "The community center," said Dr. Sarah, Chen, the colony's chief medical officer, her left arm in a makeshift sling. "We managed to get about 300 people into the underground shelter before the worst of it hit, but the entrance is blocked by debris." The community center had taken a direct hit from orbital bombardment, collapsing the upper stories into a pile of twisted structural beams and concrete slabs. Conventional rescue equipment would have taken days to clear a path to the buried shelter, and the survivors trapped below were running out of air. Kara studied the wreckage with the tactical assessment skills that had been drilled into her since childhood. The debris pile was unstable, held in place by a precarious balance of weight and friction. One wrong move could cause a secondary collapse that would crush everyone below. "I can do this," she said, beginning to strip off the bulky sections of her combat armor. "But I need to go in light and fast." She worked her way into the wreckage like a surgeon, using her enhanced strength to carefully lift and shift key pieces, while her reflexes kept her ahead of minor collapses. Each movement was calculated, precise, designed to create a path without destabilizing the entire structure. It took her 4 hours to reach the shelter entrance. When she finally pulled away the last piece of twisted metal, the sound that emerged was the most beautiful thing she had ever heard. Voices calling out, in hope and relief, people who had thought they were going to die in darkness discovering that someone had come for them. The evacuation took another 2 hours as Kara carefully guided small groups through the unstable tunnel she had created. Children, elderly colonists, injured people who had to be carried. She brought them all out safely, one by one, until the shelter was empty. When the last survivor reached the surface, the rescue flotilla Marcus had contacted finally arrived. 6 ships carrying medical personnel, supplies, and space for the surviving colonists to start over elsewhere. As the evacuation proceeded, Kara found herself standing apart from the activity, watching families reunite and friends embrace. Dr. Chen approached her with a datapad containing casualty reports. Final count is 1,147 survivors out of nearly 8,000 colonists. It could have been much worse if you hadn't stopped the bombardment when you did. "It should have been better," Kara replied. "I should have been faster." "You saved over 1,000 lives today. That's not something to regret." But Kara was thinking about the children who wouldn't grow up, the dreams that had been cut short, the simple human desire to build something lasting among them. Stars that had been crushed by alien indifference. The Genesis Project had created her to be a weapon, but today she had learned what she was really fighting for. Captain Elena Vasquez of the rescue ship Meridian found Marcus and Kara as the last of the survivors were being loaded aboard the evacuation vessels. She was a small, intense woman with the bearing of someone accustomed to impossible missions. "I've been hearing interesting stories about you two," she said. "Single ship taking on 3 hegemony dreadnoughts and winning. That kind of tactical, Innovation gets attention in certain circles. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What kind of circles? The kind that believe humanity needs more than official channels to survive out here. People like Commander Torres, Admiral Singh, Colonel Martinez, names you might recognize from the independence movements. Kara looked up from the colonist manifest she had been reviewing. You're talking about the resistance. I'm talking about people who think humanity deserves better than being carved up between the hegemony, the corporate council, and whoever else wants a piece of us. People who could use assets like you. The offer hung in the space between them like a door waiting to be opened. Marcus and Kara exchanged glances, communicating in the shorthand they had developed over their brief but intense partnership. What would you need from us? Marcus asked. Exactly what you did here. Go where the fleet can't. Help who the government won't. Fight when diplomacy fails. Operating budget, intelligence support, backup when you need it. In exchange, you keep doing what you're already doing, being human when humanity needs it most. 3 days later, the Defiance departed the Titan system carrying new orders, better equipment, and a sense of purpose that went beyond individual rescue missions. In the cargo bay, alongside medical supplies and weapons, Kara had installed a small training area where she could maintain her combat skills and work with the new team members they would eventually recruit. She stood in the observation lounge, watching the stars wheel past as they jumped to hyperspace. Her reflection in the viewport showed a woman who no longer carried the weight of other people's judgments about her worth. The Genesis Project had tried to create the perfect soldier and declared her defective when she insisted on being human. But today she understood that her humanity was not a flaw in her design. It was the point of it. Marcus joined her at the viewport, carrying 2 cups of coffee and the satisfied expression of a man who had found his calling. Regrets? He asked, offering her one of the cups. About leaving the military? About being sold like livestock? About spending 3 years thinking I was broken? Kara shook her head. All of that led me here. To this ship, to this work, to finally understanding who I'm supposed to be. And who is that? She smiled, the expression transforming her face, from merely formidable to genuinely beautiful. Someone who protects people. Someone who stands between the darkness and the light. Not because I was programmed to, but because I choose to. Outside their window, the universe continued its ancient dance of creation and destruction, indifferent to human struggles and dreams. But aboard the Defiance, 2 people who had found each other in the galaxy's forgotten corners were planning how to make that indifference a little less absolute, one rescue at a time. The message that would reach them in 3 days spoke of a mining colony under attack, children trapped in underground tunnels, families separated by corporate security, forces who valued profits over human life. It was exactly the kind of mission that official channels would ignore and bureaucrats would classify as too expensive to justify. It was perfect for them. Kara Thorne, Genesis Project Subject 247, formerly classified as defective and unsuitable for service, set down her coffee and began planning her next mission. She had work to do.